Alright, this is the last chapter of Carlos Castaneda's The Eagle's Gift. Chapter 3, still, The Eagle's Gift, Part 15, The Plumed Serpent. Having accomplished every one of the goals which the rules specified, Don Juan and his party of warriors were ready for their final task, to leave the world of everyday life. And all that was left for Lagorda, for the other apprentices, and for me was to witness it and to get Daisy out of here. Come on, Daisy. You're going to screw this thing up. There was only one unresolved problem: what to do with the apprentices. Don Juan said that properly they should leave with me by becoming incorporated into his own group. However, they were not ready. Come on, Daisy, will ya? The reactions they had while attempting to cross the bridge had demonstrated to him what their weaknesses were. Don Juan expressed the feeling that his benefactor's choice to wait years before gathering a warriors party for him had been a wise choice and had produced positive results, while his own decision to set me up quickly with the Nawal woman and my own group had nearly been fatal to us. I understood that he was voicing this not as an expression of regret, but as an affirmation of the warrior's freedom to choose and accept his choice. He said, furthermore, that he had seriously considered following his benefactor's example, and that if he had done so, he would have found out soon enough that I was not a Nawal like him, and that no one else besides me would have been engaged beyond that point. As it was, Lydia, Rosa, Benigno, Nesta, and Pablito were seriously handicapped. Lagorda and Josefina needed time to perfect themselves. Only Soledad and Eligio were safe, for they were perhaps even more proficient than the warriors in his own group. Don Juan added that it was up to the 9 of them to take their unfavorable or favorable circumstances, and without regret or despair, or patting themselves on the back, turn their curse or blessings into a living challenge. I have a cat on my lap now. Don Juan pointed out that not everything about us had been a failure. The small part that he had played amidst his warriors had been a complete triumph. The small part that we had played amidst his warriors had been a complete triumph, inasmuch as the rule fit every one of my party except me. I fully agreed with him. To begin with, the Nawal woman was everything the rule had prescribed. She had poise, control. She was a being at war. A being at war and yet thoroughly at ease, without any overt preparation. She handled and led all of Don Juan's gifted warriors, even though they were more than twice her age. These men and women asserted that she was a carbon copy of the other Nawal woman they had known. She had reflected perfectly each one of the female warriors. Consequently, she could also reflect the 5 women Don Juan had found for my party, for they were the replicas of the older ones. Lydia was Hermelinda, Josefina was Zuleika, Rosa and Lagorda were like Nelidia, and Soledad was like Delia. I was going to say, no, forget what I was going to say. The men who were also replicas of Don Juan were also replicas of Don Juan's warriors. Nesta was a copy of Vicente, Pablito of Gennaro, Benigno of Silvio, and Manuel and Eligio. Benigno of Silvio Manuel, and Eligio was like Juan Tuma. The rule was indeed the voice of an overpowering force that had molded these people into a homogeneous whole. It was only by a strange twist of fate that they had been left stranded, without the leader that would find for them the passageway into the other awareness. Don Juan said that all members of my party had to enter into that other awareness by themselves, and that he did not know what their chances were, because it was up to each one of them individually. He had helped everyone impeccably. Thus his spirit was free from worry and concern. His mind was free from idle speculations. All that was left for him to do, was to show us pragmatically what it meant to cross over the parallel lines in one's totality. Don Juan told me that at best I could only help one of the apprentices, and that he had picked LaGuardia because of her prowess, and because I was already familiar with her. He said that I had no more energy for the others, due to the fact that I had other duties to perform, other paths of action, which were congruous with my true task. Don Juan explained to me that every one of his own warriors knew what that task was, but had not revealed it to me, because I needed to prove that I was worthy of it. The fact that they were at the end of their trail, and the fact that I had faithfully followed my instructions, made it imperative that this revelation take place, although only in partial form. When the time came for Don Juan to leave, he let me know while I was in a state of normal awareness. I missed the significance of what he was saying. Don Juan tried to the very end to induce me to join my two states of awareness. Everything would have been so simple if I had been capable of that merger. Since I was not, and was only rationally touched by his revelation, he made me shift levels of awareness in order to allow me to assess the event in a more encompassing terms. He warned me repeatedly that to be in the left side awareness is an advantage only in the sense that our grasp of things is accelerated. It is a disadvantage because it allows us to focus with inconceivable lucidity only on one thing at a time. This renders us dependent and vulnerable. We cannot be on our own while being in the left side awareness, and have to be cushioned by warriors who have gained the totality of themselves and know how to handle themselves in that state. LaGuardia said that one day the Narwhal Juan Mateus and Janero rounded up all the apprentices at her house, and the Narwhal made them shift into the left side awareness, and told them that his time on earth had come to an end. She did not believe him at first. She thought that he was trying to startle them into acting like warriors. But then she realized that there was a glow in his eyes that she had never seen before. Having made them shift levels of awareness, he talked with every one of them individually and made them go through a summation, so as to refreshen all the concepts and procedures he had acquainted them with. He did the same with me. My appointment took place the day before I saw him for the last time. In my case, he conducted the summation in both states of awareness. In fact, he made me shift back and forth various times as if making sure I would be completely saturated in both. I had been unable to recollect at first what had taken place after this summation. One day LaGuardia finally succeeded in breaking the barriers of my memory. She told me that she was inside my mind as if she were reading me. Her assessment was that what kept my memory locked up was that I was afraid to remember my pain. What had happened at Silvio Manuel's house the night before they left was inextricably enmeshed with my fear. She said that she had the clearest sensation that I was afraid, but she did not know the reason why, nor could she remember what exactly had taken place in that house, specifically in the room where we sat down. As LaGuardia spoke, I felt as if I were plummeting into an abyss. I realized that something in me was trying to make a connection between two separate events that I had witnessed in my two states of awareness. On my left side, I had locked up memories of Don Juan and his party of warriors on their last day on earth. On my right side, I had the memory of having jumped that day into an abyss. In trying to join my two sides, I experienced a total sense of physical descent. My knees gave way, and I fell to the floor. When I described my experience and my interpretation of it, LaGuardia said that what was coming to my right side awareness was doubtlessly the memory that had surfaced in her as I talked. She had just remembered that we had made one more attempt to cross the parallel lines with Don Juan Mateus and his party. She said that the two of us together, with the rest of the apprentices, had tried once more to cross the bridge. I could not bring the memories into focus, There seemed to be a constricting force that prevented me from organizing my thoughts and feelings about it. Lagorda said that Silvio Manuel had told the Nahual Juan Mateus to prepare me and all the apprentices for their crossing. He did not want to leave me in the world, because he thought that I did not stand a chance of fulfilling my task. The Nahual disagreed with him, but carried out the preparations regardless of how he felt. Lagorda told me that she remembered I had driven to her house to take her as well as the other apprentices to Silvio Manuel's house. They remained there while I went back to the Nahual Juan Mateus's and Gennaro in order to prepare for the crossing. I did not remember it at all. She insisted that I should use her as a guide since we were so intimately joined. She assured me that I could read her mind and find something there that would awaken my full recollection. My mind was in a state of great turmoil. A feeling of anxiety prevented me from even focusing on what Lagorda was saying. She kept on talking, describing what she remembered of our second attempt to cross that bridge. She said that Silvio Manuel had harangued them. He told them that they had had sufficient training to try once again to cross. What they needed to enter fully into the other self was to abandon the intent of their first attention. Once they were in the awareness of the other self, the power of the Nahual Juan Mateus and his party would pick them up and lift them off into the third attention with great facility, something they could not do if the apprentices were in their normal awareness. For one instant, I was not listening to Lagorda anymore. The sound of her voice was indeed a vehicle for me. Suddenly, the memory of the entire event surfaced in my mind. I reeled under the impact of remembering. Lagorda stopped talking, and as I described my memory, she also recollected everything. We put together the last pieces of the separate memories of our two states of awareness. I remembered that Don Juan and Don Gennaro prepared me for the crossing while I was in a state of normal consciousness. I rationally thought that they were preparing me for a jump into an abyss. Lagorda remembered that to prepare them for the crossing, Silvio Manuel had hoisted them to the beams of the roof strapped in leather harnesses. There was one in every room of his house. The apprentices were kept suspended in them nearly all day. Lagorda commented that to have a harness in one's room is an ideal thing. The Gennaros, without really knowing what they were doing, had hit upon the quasi-memory of the harness they had been suspended from and had created their game. It was a game that combined the curative and cleansing qualities of being kept away from the ground with the possibility of exercising the concentration that one needs for shifting from the right to the left side consciousness. Their game was indeed a device that helped them to remember. Lagorda said that after she and all the apprentices had remained suspended all day, Silvio Manuel had brought them down at dusk. All of them went with him to the bridge and waited there with the rest of the party until the Nahual Juan Mateus and Gennaro showed up with me. The Nahual Juan Mateus explained to all of them that it had taken longer than he had anticipated to prepare me. I remember that Don Juan and his warriors crossed over the bridge before we did. Donna Soledad and Eligio automatically went with them. The Nahual woman went over last, and from the other side of the bridge, Silvio Manuel signaled us to start walking. Without saying a word, all of us began at once. Midway across the bridge, Lydia, Rosa, and Pablito seemed incapable of taking one more step. Benigno and Nesta walked almost to the end and then stopped. Only Lagorda, Josefina, and I arrived to where Don Juan and the others were standing. What happened next was very much like what happened the first time we attempted to go through. Silvio Manuel and Eligio held open something I believed was an actual slit. I had enough energy to focus my attention on it. It was not an opening on the hill that stood at the end of the bridge, nor was it an opening in the wall of fog, although I could distinguish a fog-like vapor around the slit. It was a dark, mysterious opening that stood by itself, apart from everything else. It was as big as a man, but narrow. Don Gennaro made a joke and called it the cosmic vagina. A remark that brought roaring laughter from his peers. Lagorda and Josefina held on to me, and we stepped in. I felt instantly that I was being crushed. The same incalculable force that had nearly made me explode the first time had gripped me again. I could feel Lagorda and Josefina merging with me. I seemed to be wider than they were, and the force flattened me against the two of them together. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground with Lagorda and Josefina on top of me. Silvio Manuel helped us stand up. He told me that it would be impossible for us to join them in their journey at that time, but that perhaps later, when we had turned ourselves to perfection, the eagle would let us go through. As we walked back to his house, Silvio Manuel told me almost in a whisper that their path and my path had diverged from each other that night. He said that our paths would never again meet and that I was alone. He exhorted me to be frugal and utilize every bit of my energy without wasting any of it. He assured me that if I could gain the totality of myself without excessive drainage, I would have the energy to fulfill my task. If I drained myself excessively before I lost my human form, I was done for. Miss Daisy stalking me here. I asked him if there was a way to avoid drainage. He shook his head. He replied that there was a way, but not for me. Whether I succeeded or not was not a matter of my volition. He then revealed my task. He did not tell me how to carry it out. He said that someday the eagle would put someone in my path to tell me how to do it, and not until I had succeeded would I be free. When we got to the house, all of us congregated in the large room. Don Juan sat in the center of the room, facing the southeast. The 8 female warriors surrounded him. They sat in pairs on the cardinal points, also facing the southeast. Then the 3 male warriors had made a triangle outside the circle, with Silvio Manuel at the vertex that pointed to the southeast. The 2 female couriers sat flanking him, and the 2 male couriers sat in front of him, almost against the wall. The Narwhal woman made the male apprentices sit against the east wall. She made the women sit against the west wall. She then led me to a place directly behind Don Juan. We sat there together. We remained seated for what I thought was only an instant, yet I felt a surge of unusual energy in my body. I believed that we had sat down and then immediately stood up. When I asked the Narwhal woman why we got up so quickly, she replied that we had been sitting there for several hours and that someday, before I entered into the third attention, all of it would come back to me. Lagorda stated that not only did she have the sensation that we sat in the room only for an instant, but that she was never told that it had been otherwise. What the Narwhal Juan Mateus told her afterward was that she had the obligation to help the other apprentices, especially Josefina, and that one day I would return to give her the final push she needed to cross totally into the other self. She was tied to me and to Josefina. In our dreaming together under Zulika's supervision, we had exchanged enormities of our luminosity. That was why we were able to withstand together the pressure of the other self upon entering it in the flesh. He also told her that it was the power of the warriors of his party which had made the crossing so easy the first time, and that when she would have to cross over on her own, she had to be prepared to do it in dreaming. After we had stood up, Florinda came over to where I was. She took me by the arm and walked around the room with me, while Don Juan and his warriors talked to the apprentices. She said that I should not allow the events of that night at the bridge to confuse me. I should not believe as the Narwhal Juan Mateus Cadigan had believed at one time that there is an actual physical passageway into the other self. The slit that I had seen was simply a construct of their intent, which had been trapped by my combination of the narwhal Juan Mateus's obsession with passageways and Silvio Manuel's bizarre sense of humor, the mixture of both which had produced the cosmic vagina. As far as she was concerned, the passage from one self to the other had no physicality. The cosmic vagina was a physical expression of the two men's power to move the wheel of time. Florinda explained that when she and her peers talked about time, they were not referring to something which is measured by the movement of a clock. Time is the essence of attention. The ego's emanations are made out of time, and properly when one enters into any aspect of the other self, one is becoming acquainted with time. Florinda assured me that that very night, while we sat in the formation, they had had their last chance to help me. The apprentices, they had had their last chance to help me and the apprentices to face the wheel of time. She said that the wheel of time is like a state of heightened awareness, which is part of the other self. The cat is on me now. Which is part of the other self, if I can find the scene. As the left side awareness is part of the self of everyday life. And that it could physically be described as a tunnel of infinite length and width, a tunnel with reflective furrows. Every furrow is infinite, and there is an infinite number of them. Living creatures are compulsorily, you know what I mean? I can't say it. They are compulsorily made by the force of life to gaze into one furrow. To gaze into it means to be trapped by it, to live in that furrow. Compulsorily, I'm never going to get that. To be compelled to, right? She asserted that what warriors call will belongs to the wheel of time. It is something like the runner of a vine, or an intangible tentacle which all of us possess. She said that a warrior's final aim is to learn to focus it on the wheel of time in order to make it turn. Warriors who have succeeded in turning the wheel of time can gaze into any furrow and draw from it whatever they desire, such as the cosmic vagina. To be trapped with compulsion, I just can't say it, in one furrow of time entails seeing the images of that furrow only as they recede. To be free from the spellbinding force that one of those grooves means that one can look in either direction as images recede or as they approach. Now the cat can sit on the microphone there. Florinda stopped talking and embraced me. She whispered in my ear that she would be back to finish her instruction someday, when I had gained the totality of myself. Don Juan called everyone to come to where I was. They surrounded me. Don Juan spoke to me first. He said that I could not go with them on their journey because it was impossible that I could withdraw from my past. Under those circumstances, the only thing they could do for me would be to wish me well. He added that warriors have no life of their own. From the moment they understand the nature of awareness, they cease to be persons, and the human condition is no longer a part of their view. I had my duty as a warrior, and nothing else was important, for I was going to be left behind to fulfill a most obscure task. Since I had already relinquished my life, there was nothing else for them to say to me, except that I should do my best. And there was nothing for me to say to them, except that I had understood and accepted my fate. Vincente came to my side. He spoke very softly. He said that the challenge of a warrior is to arrive at a very subtle balance of positive and negative forces. This challenge does not mean that a warrior should strive to have everything under control, but that a warrior should strive to meet any conceivable situation, and the expected and the unexpected, with equal efficiency. To be perfect under perfect circumstances was to be a paper warrior. My challenge was to be left behind. Theirs was to strike onward into the unknowable. Both challenges were consuming. For warriors, the excitation of staying put is equal to the excitation of the journey. Both are equal, because both entail fulfilling a sacred trust. Silvio Manuel came to my side next. He was concerned with practicalities. He gave me a formula, an incantation for times when my task would be greater than my strength. It was the incantation that came to my mind the first time I remembered the Narwhal woman. This is the incantation. I am already given to the power that rules my fate, and I cling to nothing, so I will have nothing to defend. I have no thoughts, so I will see. I fear nothing, so I will remember myself, detached and at ease. I will dart past the eagle to be free. He told me that he was going to reveal to me a practical maneuver of the second attention, and right then he turned into a luminous egg. He reverted back to his normal appearance and repeated his transformation 3 or 4 times. I understood perfectly well what he was doing. He did not need to explain to me, and yet I could not put into words what I knew. Silvio Manuel smiled, cognizant of my problem. He said that it took an enormity of strength to let go of the intent of everyday life. The secret that he had just revealed was how to expedite letting go of that intent. In order to do what he had done, one must place one's attention on the luminous shell. He turned one more time into a luminous egg, and then it became obvious to me that he had known then it became obvious to me what I had known all along. Silvio Manuel's eyes turned for an instant to focus on the point of the second attention. His head was straight, as if he had been looking ahead of him. Only his eyes were askew. He said that a warrior must evoke intent. The glance is the secret. The eyes beckon intent. I became euphoric at that point. I was at long last capable of thinking about something I knew, without really knowing. The reason why seeing seems to be visual is because we need the eyes to focus on intent. Don Juan and his party of warriors knew how to use their eyes to catch another aspect of intent, and called this act seeing. What Silvio Manuel had shown me was the true function of the eyes, the catchers of intent. I then used my eyes deliberately to beckon intent. I focused them on the point of the second attention. All of a sudden, Don Juan, his warriors, Donna Soledad, Eligio were luminous eggs, but not Lagorda and the 3 little sisters, and the Janeros. I kept on moving my eyes back and forth between the blobs of light and the people, until I heard a crack in the base of my neck, and everybody in the room was a luminous egg. I felt for an instant that I could not tell them apart, but then my eyes seemed to adjust, and I held 2 aspects of intent, 2 images at once. I could see their physical bodies and also their luminosity. The 2 scenes were not superimposed on each other, but separate, and yet I could not figure out how. I definitely had 2 channels of vision, and seeing had everything to do with my eyes, and yet was independent of them. I could still see the luminous eggs, but not their physical bodies when I closed my eyes. I had for one moment the clearest sensation that I knew how to shift my attention to my luminosity. I also knew that to revert to the physical level, all I had to do was to focus my eyes on my body. Don Janeiro came to my side next and told me that the Narwhal Juan Mateus, as a parting gift, had given me duty. Vincente had given me challenge. Silvio Manuel had given me magic, and he was going to give me humor. He looked me up and down and commented that I was the sorriest looking narwhal he had ever seen. He examined the apprentices and concluded that there was nothing else for us to do except to be optimistic and to look on the positive side of things. He told us a joke about a country girl who was seduced and jilted by a city slicker. When she was told on the day of her wedding that the groom had left town, she pulled herself together with the sobering thought that not everything had been lost. She had lost her virginity, but she had not yet killed her piglet for the wedding feast. Don Janeiro told us that the only thing that would help us to get out of our situation which was the situation of the jilted bride, was to hold on to our piglets, whatever they might be, and laugh ourselves silly. Only through laughter could we change our condition. He coaxed us with gestures of his head and hands to give him a hearty ha-ha. The sight of the apprentices trying to laugh was as ridiculous as my own attempt. Suddenly I was laughing with Don Juan and his warriors. Don Gennaro had always made jokes about my being a poet. He asked me to read a poem out loud. He said that he wanted to surmise his sentiments and his recommendations with a poem that celebrates life, death, and laughter. He was referring to a fraction of Jose Gostiz's poem, Death Without End. The narwhal woman handed me the book, and I read the part that Don Juan and Don Gennaro had always liked. Oh, that blind joy. Oh, what blind joy. What hunger to use up. The air we breathe, the mouth, the eye, the hand. What biting itch to spend absolutely all of ourselves in one single burst of laughter. Oh, this impudent, insulting death that assassinates us from afar over the pleasure that we take in dying, for a cup of tea, for a faint caress. Sorry, the printing's different, it's hard to read. The setting for the poem was overpowering. I felt the shiver. Emilito and the Courier Wantuma came to my side. They did not say a word. Their eyes were shining like black marbles. All their feelings seemed to be focused in their eyes. The Courier Wantuma said very softly that he had ushered me into the mysteries of Mescalito at his house, that had been a forerunner of another occasion in the wheel of time, when he would usher me into the ultimate mystery. Emilito said, as if his voice were an echo of the Courier Wantuma's, that both of them were confident that I was going to fulfill my task. They would be waiting, for I would join them someday. The Courier Wantuma added that the eagle had put me with the Nawal Juan Mateus' party as my rescue unit. They embraced me again and whispered in unison that I should trust myself. After the couriers, the female warriors came to me. Each one hugged me and whispered a wish in my ear, a wish of plenitude and fulfillment. The Nawal woman came to me at last. She sat down and held me in her lap as if I were her child. She exuded affection and purity. I was breathless. We stood up and walked around the room. We talked about pondering our fate. Forces impossible to fathom had guided us to the culmination of the moment. The awe I felt was immeasurable, and so was my sadness. She then revealed to me a portion of the rule that applies to the three-pronged narwhal. She was in a state of ultimate agitation, and yet she was calm. Her intellect was peerless, and yet she was not trying to reason anything out. Her last day on earth overwhelmed her. She filled me with her mood. It was as if, up to that moment, I had not quite realized the finality of our situation. Being on the left side entailed that the primacy of the immediate took precedence, which made it practically impossible for me to foresee beyond that moment. However, the impact of her mood engaged a great deal of my right side awareness and its capacity to prejudge feelings that are to come. I realized that I would never again see her, and that was unbearable. Don Juan had told me that on the left side there are no tears, that a warrior can no longer weep, and that the only expression of anguish is a shiver that comes from the very depths of the universe. It is as if one of the eagle's emanations is anguish. The warrior's shiver is infinite, and as the narwhal woman talked to me and held me, I felt that shiver. She put her arms around my neck and pressed her head against mine. I thought she was wringing me like a piece of cloth. I felt something coming out of my body, or out of hers into mine. My anguish was so intense, and it flooded me so fast that I went berserk. I fell to the floor with the narwhal woman still embracing me. I thought, as if in a dream, that I must have gashed her forehead in our fall. Her face and mine were covered with blood. Blood had pooled in her eyes. Don Juan and Don Gennaro very swiftly lifted me up. They held me as if having uncontainable They held me as I was having uncontainable spasms, like seizures. The female warriors surrounded the narwhal woman. Then they stood in a row in the middle of the room. The men joined them. In one moment, they were an undeniable chain of energy. There was an undeniable chain of energy going between them. The row moved in parallel in front of me. Each one of them became for a moment and stood in front of me, but without breaking the row. It was as if they were moving on a conveyor that transported them and made each one of them stop in front of me. The male couriers went by first, then the female couriers, then the male warriors, then the dreamers, then the stalkers, and finally the narwhal woman. They went by me and remained in my full view for a second or two, long enough to say goodbye, and then they disappeared into the blackness of the mysterious slit that had appeared in the room. Don Juan pressed my back and relieved some of my unbearable anguish. He said that he understood my pain, and that the affinity of the narwhal man and the narwhal woman is not something that can be formulated. It exists as a result of the emanations of the eagle. Once the two people are put together, they are separated. There is no way to fill the emptiness, because it is not social emptiness, but a movement of those emanations. Don Juan told me then that he was going to make me shift to my extreme right. He said that it was merciful, a merciful although temporary maneuver. It would allow me to forget for the time being, but it would not soothe me when I remembered. Don Juan also told me that the act of remembering is thoroughly incomprehensible. In actuality, it is the act of remembering oneself, which does not stop at the recollecting interaction warriors perform in their left side awareness, but goes on to recollect every memory that the luminous body has stored from the moment of birth. The systematic interaction warriors go through in states of heightened consciousness is only a device to entice the other self to reveal itself in terms of memories. This act of remembering, although it seems to be only associated with warriors, is something that is within the realm of every human being. Every one of us can go directly to the memories of our luminosity with unfathomable results. Don Juan said then that that day they would leave at dusk, that the only thing they still had to do for me was to create an opening, an interruption in the continuum of my time. They were going to make me jump into an abyss as a means of interrupting the eagle's emanation that accounts for my feeling that I am whole and continuous. The jump was going to be done while I was in a state of normal awareness, and the idea was that my second attention would take over. Rather than dying at the bottom of the abyss, I would enter fully into the other self. Don Juan said that I would eventually come out of the other self once my energy was exhausted, but I would not come out at the same mountaintop from where I was going to jump. He predicted that I would emerge at my favorite spot, wherever it might be. This would be the interruption in the continuum of my time. He then pushed me completely out of my left side awareness, and I forgot my anguish, my purpose, my task. At dusk that afternoon, Pablito, Nestor, and I did jump off a precipice. The narwhal's blow had been so accurate and so merciful that nothing of the momentous event of their farewell transcended beyond the limits of the other momentous event of jumping to certain death and not dying. Awe-inspiring as the event was, it was pale in comparison to what was taking place in the other realm. Don Juan made me jump at the precise moment when he and all of his warriors had kindled their awareness. I had a dreamlike vision of a row of people looking at me. Afterwards, I rationalized that it was just one of a long series of visions or hallucinations I had had upon jumping. This was the meager interpretation of my right side awareness, overwhelmed by the awesomeness of the total event. On my left side, however, I realized that I had entered into the other self. And this entrance had nothing to do with my rationality. The warriors of Don Juan's party had taught me for an eternal instant before they had vanished into the totality of light, before the eagle let them go through. I knew that they were in the range of the eagle's emanations, which was beyond my reach. They were waiting for Don Juan and Don Gennaro. I saw Don Juan take the lead. And then there was only a line of exquisite lights in the sky. Something like a wind seemed to make the cluster of lights contract and wriggle. There was a massive glow on one end of the line of lights where Don Juan was. I thought of the Plumed Serpent of the Toltec legend, and then the lights were gone. End of chapter and the end of the book. And I hope you enjoyed it. I gotta undo this.